Okay, I think we're ready to start this closing plenary session. I'd like to introduce myself, or reintroduce myself, as the case may be. I'm Samir Gandesha. I'm the Director of the Institute for Humanities, and the Institute has hosted this conference with many very generous supporters who will be mentioned at the conclusion of our session today. I'd like to start by acknowledging that we are on Coast Salish, unceded Coast Salish territories, the territories of the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish nations. I very much appreciate and was indeed profoundly moved by Audrey's welcome on Friday with Carleen Thomas and also Taylor Willis George from the Squamish Nation. It was profoundly moving for all of us, I think. So thank you again, Audrey. Thank you, Carleen and Taylor, who aren't here at present. Just a word about what we plan now for this session. We're going to take the lead of Aziz Chowdhury, who just provided us with a terrific keynote, within which he suggested that we need more open space for discussion and dialogue, and we'd really like to do that in this session. We will have people say a few words, people who have participated in the conference so far, as well as the organizing committee here that's up with me on the stage. I'd like to just briefly introduce the organizing committee members and the speakers who you've already met and who will be participating in this plenary session. And we really want to rush to open it up and hear from all of you. So on the far left over there is Kate Murray. Kavita, I didn't see you guys at all. Kavita Reddy, who's been involved with the organizing committee right from the start, has done a massive amount of work. Huyen Pham, who's done a tremendous amount of work for this conference, but also for the Institute as a whole. She's the program assistant, but as I like to call her, the nerve center of the Institute. She's the one who makes everything happen, and so hugely indebted to Huyen. Kate Murray, who's been very much involved with the organizing of this conference, and especially also the Toxic Tour, both of which were mentioned this morning on CBC. I'm going to skip over that guy for a second. Shirley Samples done an amazing amount of work for this conference, and has done a particularly important job in terms of liaising with all of our Aboriginal and Indigenous participants. Brad Hornick, also one of the key organizers right from the start, who's done a tremendous job with the website, with the Contours Journal, and the photography, the media guy does it all. He's also a terrific writer. To my right here we have Andrew Bruce, who just came out of surgery not too long ago to take the reins up of being conference manager. The reign. and he's done a terrific job. Thank you, Andrew. And then to my right, over here, far right, but not on the political spectrum, we have Brooke Pearson, who teaches in my department in very precarious conditions, does an amazing job there. I don't know how he finds the time, actually, to do this kind of work, along with just simply teaching to stay alive and also researching and writing. It's phenomenal. You amaze me, Brooke. Last but not least, Professor Stephen Collis, who has really been the organizational, the political, the intellectual, spiritual driver of this conference, without a doubt. Big round of applause for Stephen, but also for all the organizing committee members. They've done an amazing job. So I'd also like to reintroduce to you Patrick Ocean and Miguel Michanovs, who will also be participating on this plenary. I think what we'd like to do is just say a couple of words to get the discussion going, and then throw it open. So, should we start right at the end and work our way forward? Start with Kate.
I wrote, keep writing things on my hand to try to remember. I wanted to mention just briefly that the Toxic Tour was just a really big collective effort. So I'm the one who's in the room right now, but it was My Injustice Alliance, but also No One Is Illegal, and Streams of Justice, and Canada-Philippines Solidarity Committee, Canada-Tibet Solidarity Committee, but there are just so many people involved, and I know I'm forgetting. No One Is Illegal. There's lots of people involved, so please, well, look them up and get involved. I guess I know there's a lot of people with a ton of amazing organizing experience in the room, and so I guess I'm just really looking forward to, I just ask people to share. There's so many people that I really admire and respect, and I saw you walking in, and so I'm really looking forward to hearing what people, what their insights are, and I hope we take time to share. So that I guess I just wanted to ask a question for people to share their experience, please. We really want to think about what we can do going forward in the session, and so if you have requests of us, please ask us how you'd like us to, I don't know, help to document or make connections or something. Like, we're really, really looking for answers in this, or insights, and sort of a bit of direction, I think, in this session. I wanted to say also that one of the sessions I was in yesterday, or this morning, there were some amazing connections made between sort of property markets and displacement, and so gentrification, housing displacement, and environmental justice issues and extraction issues, and so some of the questions, and there were stories of disconnects and people trying to forge connections between those movements, and that not always being welcomed, and so I really just wanted to bring that in. It was a fabulous experience, yeah. So thank you.
That's great. Thank you, Kate. Just really briefly, going back to something Aziz said just in the last hour, and in part that's about the room we're in, the Fletcher Challenge room, and the fact that around the corner from us is the Barrick Gold room. It's like a teeny classroom with like 20 chairs in it. It's got Barrick Gold's name on it. They really want a piece of this action, apparently. We could go to the campus not far down the road from us, the Gold Corp Center for the Arts, which takes up a whole city block, and on and on. And so one of the real goals of this conference was in some ways to reclaim these highly corporatized academic spaces for the people who do the real organizing and the real struggling, the real suffering all over the world. I mean, we got people from the Philippines and Kenya and Mexico and Ecuador and Guatemala, and all parts of the unceded territories that make up much of British Columbia, and those northern territories in Alberta that have this massive blight of the tar sands right on top of where they're living and trying to survive. So how do we open up this space again? Because a university is part of the problem. And believe me, organizing this conference was, a whole new learning experience of how big a problem the university is. It's not designed to do this. It doesn't want to talk to the world. It doesn't want to engage the world. It doesn't want to hear from those other people outside the academy. It wants to talk to them. So we've mostly heard from people who are not academics. And that was very strategic and purposeful. We need to find ways of connecting these communities and struggles, but doing it in an open, not top-down way, and really providing a space for the knowledge. This goes back to what Aziz was saying, the knowledge and the research that comes out of struggles. Not privileging the knowledge and the research that comes out of the university. Maybe there's resources here we can open up and use and provide, but really, there's a knowledge outside the university that we need to bring together. If we're actually going to build struggles that function, if we're actually going to build functional solidarity where we can really support these disparate struggles. So that's what the ambition was, but the other ambition in which we have yet to realize a fair is how to carry this forward in some way. So we'll head in that direction anyhow. Thank you.
It's hard to follow that. It was so amazingly simple, but also showed the complexity of what we tried to do this weekend, bringing together people from all, avenues. We were privileged to have someone from Africa, South America, and we had the Nina Stoughton, Maddie Lee Camp. And to me, as a grassroots organizer, I've been waiting for this to happen, and I'm just thankful that we have people like Stephen and Brad and Samir, and that have the vision that this is what is going to affect change on the planet. We need to start from the bottom up. We need to, as individuals, see our place on the planet, see our place as that the planet is in trouble. There's many people that are suffering. There's many creatures that are suffering. And if each of us does our part and stops for a little while just to think about that we need to be the change we want to see. So that's what I'm totally inspired. I'm totally encouraged. It's been an absolute pleasure, and working with all these beautiful people up at the front. And I think if we can keep this vision, and if we can keep this solidarity, and if everyone takes something away from the conference so that we can come together again and have this community just keep growing and growing and growing, so that we can be the change, and that the earth and the planet and all of us can have a really beautiful future. Thanks very much, everyone.
Hi everyone, my name is Brad, and this involvement in this conference started in my mind, I guess, 10 years ago. I met somebody who has been an honored guest here from Africa, Patrick. We met in Central America 10 years ago. We were both part of a delegation called Central America Not for Sale. So there was 8 Kenyan activists who came to visit with 3 Salvadoran activists, and we traveled to 3 countries, El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras. And we visited mega projects. We call them mega projects, right? Mining projects, large tourist projects, hydroelectric projects, and met with other activists and community people. It was an incredible experience, as you can imagine. The Africans were just amazing as a group. They sang, in their introductions to reach a human level with the people we were organizing with. And the amount of stories and the depth of the stories and the struggle that they described in both regions was absolutely incredible for me. So it was very formative, those 3 weeks. I remember when I first started, though, I gave a little bit of a presentation to everybody. We had a forum, and I did a presentation, and I wanted to contribute something from the Canadian perspective. So at that point in my thinking, I thought, okay, well, let me talk about Canada and the U.S., right? And I basically vocalized pretty much a mainstream leftist position in Canada in relation to the United States, which was about we're a peripheral region right next to a metropole, and we have this problem of being a staples economy. And the left wing here is about promoting value-added industrial development and working against the imperial interests of the United States. So it's basically the Council of Canadian line, right? And pretty much still what the left still is in Canada. Now, I got a lot of cold stares from the audience from that, this group of activists. And at the 3 weeks of meeting, there's so many stories I'd like to convey, but believe me, they're very intimate stories about the real life of real people struggling at the community levels. I learned a lot those weeks, and I vowed that I would never shy away again from talking about Canada as an imperialist country, a colonial country, right? A capitalist country in its own right, right? And And I remember some of the questions, you know, some of the challenges that were put to me by the Africans and Central Americans. You know, find out and share this information with us. And so that's something that it was a privilege to call to Facebook, Patrick, what was it, or email, and have him come here and also work with this group of people that is so highly intelligent and so compassionate and so close to all the issues, to emphasize and prioritize things in the right way in this conference, which is to emphasize, to give the floor to frontline activists, and particularly First Nation frontline activists. Those who are both at the lead of carrying out the struggle globally against extraction, capitalism, colonialism, and imperialism. Those most affected, those are who are the victims, and those are actually those who are taking the most courageous stances. And forget the NGO bullshit sorry, I mean there's a lot of great people involved in NGOs, absolutely, and a lot of great NGOs that are doing stuff. But this has been a different conference because I think we've tried our best in getting our priorities straight. So anyway, it's been a privilege to work with this group.
Thanks, Brad. I'll just make a very brief comment about something that I've observed over this conference. It's of particular interest to me, is the beautiful artwork that's been around us. I just can't stop staring at this mural in particular. It's just so moving to me. And so I just want to just briefly touch on it. We can bring it up in the discussion later. Mike and Warren's a section this morning too about the art of extraction. I just want to just bring people's attention, or to think about, when we're talking about activism, we're talking about communicating, to be thinking about ways that transcend our languages, especially this is a way for those of us who are learning our indigenous languages for the first time and preserving our indigenous languages. We want to communicate as broadly as we can, and I just want to speak up for the aesthetic moment and the effective power of art. So thank you very much.
Let me follow that up by apologizing for pulling you, if you were in the room upstairs in the, was the Museum of the Now? The Now. That's about the worst thing I think I've ever done, to ask people to leave an art exhibit. So please go back when we're finished. It only has till, I think, till 6. So I walked in and it's beautiful. It's really interesting. So do go spend some time. I have no idea what to say. I'm a convert. I'm a pretty recent convert. I grew up right-wing and Christian, and this world didn't matter, to be honest with you. There's a lot of people you can listen to right now about that. You see them on the news, you see them on the television getting ready for presidential runs. And I know exactly what that's like from the inside. A book I'm working on right now its working title is Slow Think. It just describes me. And the subtitle I often think is Reading Marx After 35. Because everything that we've looked at and done this weekend, it's really new to me in a lot of ways. Now, I've gone pretty hard at it. And I have the unbelievable privilege of being able to stand up in front of and sit down with groups of young people and older people all the time. I don't just teach to eat, although that helps, but I used to think teaching was an addiction, and now I just realize it's an enormous privilege. And from my perspective, what we've been doing this weekend is just an extension of that. Because violent struggle will produce certain changes, but it will often reproduce the conditions that we seek to change. The struggle that we can actually affect, every single one of us, all the time, is the mind. And this is what we have to change, not just in ourselves, but in those around us. Marx said it best when he said, you've got to be emancipated yourself before you can emancipate others. And that's a powerful line. I think it's a powerful concept. Sometimes we ask the question, so how do you get emancipated in the first place if you have to be emancipated to emancipate others? And I don't know, but here we are. Somehow we've gotten here to the point where the people in this room are able to think about what's wrong, to think about what needs to change, to think about history and realize our embeddedness in it. And that's a beginning. We're only at the beginning, and it's going to get worse. And it's probably not going to get better within our lifetimes. This is a struggle that is going to continue on every level, all across the planet. This will describe every moment of the rest of your lives, your children's lives, your children's children's lives. And the one thing that I can say very surely is that I'm never going to stop thinking about it. And I thank you all so much for helping me as a convert.
Thanks so much, Brooke. I just want to say two things, and then I'd like to turn it over to Patrick and Miguel, and then get the discussion going. So this session really is devoted to where we go from here. And I just want to speak very briefly about where I see the Institute going from here. I started out talking to Audrey at the protocol about what I thought the Institute could contribute, how we might look at this not just as a one-off thing, but really try and build on what we've started to do here, yes, but this also has a 2 to 3 year history as well. And the initial lecture series that Steve Collis organized was entitled the Mining and Canadian Universities lecture series, or at least one of them was. So I think that already puts the question of the university front and center, right? The Institute exists within the university, but it also has a very important foot outside of it, and I think you're seeing that today. And this is something that I think we need to build upon. I think that I might have a difference of inflection from Aziz, maybe more along the lines of the things that Caleb was saying, that we need scientists, we need scholars, we need artists, to be able to also support the struggles that are happening in Unistoten Camp and Maddie Lee with Richard Wright and so on. I think we need to have a kind of capacity, a critical scholarly capacity within the university, in the Institute, for example, to try to do that. So one of the things that I'd like to do is to try and develop more research capacity that would be oriented towards bringing into play so knowledge from struggle, the struggle knowledge, as he's put it very nicely. So this is one of the things that we will certainly be working on. But let's certainly not forget that the university is a critically contradictory space, right? And I think what Steve was suggesting, and what certainly I got from the presentations from the first frontline land defenders, is that so much of what we've been talking about is how we inhabit places and spaces, right? How do we inhabit these unceded Coast Salish territories as settlers? How do First Nations inhabit their own lands? What kinds of ceremonies, what kinds of relations do they have to the land and to one another? So on that basis, I think that in the university, we have to talk about how we inhabit this space. How do we inhabit this particular architecture? How do we inhabit Goldcorp? We have to do it otherwise. We have to do it critically and consciously in such a way as we move things in a very different direction. Right? So inhabitation, in my view, is absolutely key. So going forward, one of the things we'll be doing come this fall is we'll be hosting Roxanne Dunbar-Ortiz, who has written, amongst other things, an Indigenous Peoples History of the United States. It is a tremendously eye-opening account of US history, and really looking forward to that. We will be putting together a program that also builds on that, not just this year, but in the years to come. So on this note, I will finish. I just want to say one last thing, a declaration of solidarity with those struggling within universities, at the University of Amsterdam, the University of London, LSE, our comrades and colleagues at York, and U of T, who are on strike. They're struggling against a neoliberal university to create spaces that can be inhabited differently. So I think a big round of applause for those folks who are struggling.
Just want to quickly, hold on, thanks Samir. So we wouldn't have the robust program that the Institute of Humanities engages with and the risks it takes because it realizes what the university lies about in a way when it says that we're engaging the world, because the Institute is the real point where it is trying actually to engage the world. And when the university, the larger university looks at that, it goes, whoa, we didn't maybe have that in mind. This was PR, not a real thing. So just hats off to Samir and all the work he does and all the work he's done to chaperone this conference. Yeah. So up here are just a few thoughts. The first few points are really quotations from my notebook. I think that the first one is Togastai, I think Caleb's in there. A few other people have spoken this weekend, have thrown some of the things they said up there. And just some really open-ended questions about what we might have a discussion about. But to kick us off for reals, I guess, I would love to ask Miguel and Patrick to come up. And you can be right here if you want to sit on the stage with a microphone. And just share some final thoughts with us, just a few minutes as we turn this over into thinking about how we can use this as an opportunity to keep building something and to keep connected. We've got a few thoughts, but we'd love to hear from everyone too.
Can we turn the mic down a little bit?
No, I'm probably just holding it too close to my mouth. Is that better? Sorry. Is that better now? Okay, good. That was my fault. Do you want to come again, Patrick? And if you're more comfortable, you can sit back there or you can sit right here. This is good. It's better.
Getting on. Good afternoon. Let me begin again by thanking the team that was here for having given me an opportunity and a chance to come and talk to you all wonderful people. Let me also thank the First Nations for allowing us to also be part of the territory, even if for 3 days or 4 days. And I hope we are welcome to visit you again and visit with you. I just want to share with you rough thoughts. I don't have very organized thoughts, and I can only think about this roughly. Of course, being one who is not an academic, you can't be so systematic like my colleagues. But I want to encourage Samir that to even organize a thing like this in our current world, and with the neoliberal society that we have developed, is in itself an achievement. I mean, that we can come into this space and say the kind of things we are saying, for me, I think the university has kind of pushed itself quite a bit. What needs to encourage you is that these universities are owned, and it depends on who owns them. And if you can, within the ownership of the university, say the kind of things we are saying, I think those are the things we need to encourage other universities to do. From this, I think if we can take the message of conversion, I mean, somebody has talked about being converted. If we can live here with that message and say, I'm going to convert somebody because of what I've gone through for the last 3 days, I'm going to have to help somebody understand what exactly happens in extractive. I think that will be a great thing for all of us. And there's a lot of things that you can do. I mean, if you know an executive of an extraction company, or a relation of, somebody who works in extraction, or a wife of, or a husband of, or a manager of, you have a great chance to help them understand that there are certain things they need to know that can change the circumstances of humanity, so that we don't get into more trouble. And all of you are in touch and in contact with, people of influence, either in the corporations or in the government, or people in policy, that you can give the information that we've been sharing for the last 3 days. And it might be that just that piece of information may help them to see things differently. And so I think there's a starting point for everyone from this. The second thing I wanted to say, I kind of liked what happened in the last panel, that was talking about the law. And there's a tendency for lawyers, and if there are lawyers in the room, don't lynch me, to think that law is everything, that the law can fix virtually everything you talk about in society. And I think this worldview is one thing we need to deal with, because I think the law messes so many things. Whether it can fix them is another story, but it messes very many things. What I do know about the law, because I work with communities and I work with, customary law communities, is that for me, the courtroom can only be a small contribution to what the larger thing that we want to achieve. So I don't dissuade people not to go to court if they have resources to go there. I encourage them to do so. But I keep telling them that if you do go to court, please make sure that what happens in that courtroom generates a lot of other lessons. To the extent that if we are in court for a particular issue, I'm interested in finding out how many indigenous people attend that session. Is the courtroom packed? If we can fill the courtroom, I normally feel very happy, because there's a lot of education that goes on. Ordinarily, the things that are discussed in court are not for common consumption. So I really never mind what happens between the lawyer and the judge. But I like what happens when the courtroom is packed, because in a sense it intimidates the judge. So part of the work I do is to try and make sure that we can intimidate the judge. And every time I talk to communities, I tell them, don't just come yourself, you can come with your goats and your dogs. I mean, they're your goats and they're your dogs, so really, come with those, so that we can also have a discussion with the judge in which we don't speak. And for me, that sometimes helps, because then you get out of there, much more educated. When I talk to communities, I also tell them the legal system is useful. If one of us gets arrested, there's no point spending all the resources trying to get him out. We should spend more resources trying to get more of us arrested. Something about spaces, jails have limited spaces, they can't carry so many, just by the way they are constructed. So if you overwhelm them, many times they will often release all of you because they have nowhere to hold you. But sometimes it's practical things like, they may not be able to feed you. So you may die, if you're so many. So there's a sense in which you might get that one guy released because you are too many who presented yourselves for arrest. So these are some of the things I'd like I picked up a few things that I want to share with you. But the reason I encourage people to go into that jail is for them to learn, and here is why. A lot of learning that happens when you go to a lecture room, in fact, comes through this ear and leaves through the other ear. But when someone locks you up for just a few hours, 3 hours, if you're to be locked up for a few hours, 3 hours that you didn't have your freedom, you're going to ask yourself very important questions. And you're going to find answers to those questions. You don't have your cell phone, you don't have your bike, you're not sure whether lunch will come through or not. Then you begin to appreciate the importance of freedom, and perhaps then you will learn whether extraction is a good thing or it's a bad thing. So for me, those legal systems can also become very good educational systems. In the year 2000 and I think 4 or 5 there, the WTO organized a meeting in Kenya, to talk about the WTO things, and we organized, farmers to go and protest outside the WTO meeting. Unfortunately for us, about 40 or 50 of us were arrested because we were disrupting an international meeting and so on, and assembling without, permits. The kind of things that the law does. I mean, the law allows the police to arrest you for doing such things. What this did to us that I'd like to share with you is that there were people who were arrested who are, they've just been farmers. They've never gone into a police cell. And that was their first time going in there. Some women were arrested with their children. They were carrying little babies. And so we decided to inform them what WTO means, while we were in the cells there, because we were there for a couple of days. And I can tell you today, we have very prolific activists based on that incident. People we never knew would be in the sector with us. They are better than us right now as I speak. And they wouldn't have been if they were not arrested. So sometimes I almost imagine that people should experience something for them to be able to understand what it exactly means. And so there's a lot of things here that we need to experience. And when I listen to the First Nations, I think the other thing for all of us is to say, how can I be part of the First Nations struggle? Sometimes I think visiting, staying with them, understanding what they go through in a day or two is so helpful, because then you'll be able to pass out this message to another person. I'm living here knowing that a lot of you will take interest in some of the stuff that was shared here by that panel that came from the First Nations. And it may be something that 10 years later, the Institute will say, we planted this seed and it has, germinated into something really useful. Let me say things that can be done. I mean, things that I saw based on what I think we need to do. The truth is that in all the places where extractive activities are targeting, communities in those places don't have agency. And if this conference as an outcome is not going to deal with issues of agency, how can we give extractive affected communities agency, so that they're able to confront their circumstances? And one of the things that I know about agency is that you need information. If you don't have information, you never really know what to do. That information exists here, but it's not there in Guatemala, it's not there in Honduras, it's not there in Kenya. The places where Canadian companies have decided to go and do their activities. Is there a way in which one of the outcomes of this conference would be that we can package this information and get it to the places where it needs to get, so that people know which company is this they're dealing with, what is this Barrick Gold? You saw one of the slides that the lawyer had there showing the monumental thing that Barrick Gold is. I mean, I have no idea that it could be that big when I looked at the slide there. But if that's what it is, then it's a monster. And if it's that kind of a monster, you can imagine some just ordinary, simple woman whose land has been taken away fighting with such a monster. I mean, this is something I think we have to think about, and see how that information can get down to the people who really need it. And I'm here talking about not just information per se, but analytical information. Information that can give you a sense of what to do. So if you can package it, information that can help you understand the likely future trends, so that you can anticipate. Part of our problem is we can't anticipate. We don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. We don't know whether Harbour will wake up and then come up with another C52 or C51, whatever. So help us to anticipate some of the actions that are likely to be taken, so that we are able to also have planning that that anticipates, so that we do the right thing. The other information that we may need to work with each other is, conflict information. I mean, we can tell you what the next kind of conflict will happen, but if you told us what is likely to happen, we can also package what sort of conflict is likely to generate, so that then we are able to support one another. Many communities in the places where extraction takes place do not know the contracts that the companies have signed with their government. Here you have information laws that may allow you to compel your state to produce certain things. I would be so happy to see a contract that Barrick Gold has, for example, signed with the Tanzanian government. Then we are able to understand, does that contract have any revenues? Does it have any useful thing that anyone can talk about? So that then you tell communities affected that this contract promises you some revenue. Go and ask for it. Or this contract promises you resettlement, or it promises you this or that. We don't see those contracts. We don't know what those contracts have. And I think knowing what the contract has is an important aspect of the struggle, because it enables you to know what you're fighting and why you should fight and how you probably can fight it. Fiscal monitoring. I mean, we would not know, what the fiscus is, so that then you can push your government. If you knew what your government is getting, then you're able to know what kind of push you should place to their doorstep. And so, if you guys can find information around resource rents, that accrue from these contracts, it would be useful information for anybody who is doing advocacy on the other side. And I guess that is something the university, whether it stands on the left or in the center or somewhere in between, is able to do, together with activists who are on this side. Some of the things that can be done at the community level, which I think are useful, many of the First Nations communities that spoke here would do very well if somebody helped them to map their territories, to document their resources, and profile them. And there's technology to do this. GIS and all these other things can help these communities, and I'm sure the expertise to do so also exists. So that then they have a more solid engagement framework. You've got something on the table that is saying, this is what my territory looks like. This is how it is on the digital map, and these are the resources of it, and these are our households, and so on and so forth, and the peculiarities around each of the First Nations. As a tool of negotiation, I think you're at a better place when you really know. I have seen situations where the company sometimes opens up and say, you guys have been complaining, can we talk? And the community leaders come through, and there's this round table, and they ask you, okay, how many are you? And the community can't tell how many they are. I mean, not because that's an important information for them, but they don't have it. So from a bargaining point of view, they're unable to bargain because they just don't have, very simple tools. How many are you? What are the water points that you're saying are affected? Where are they? And they say, oh, this one near so-and-so, the other one near the other place. And, that doesn't really make sense in legal negotiations. You know how lawyers operate. You know how companies and how the systems work. So if we can help communities to have that kind of solid basis for talking, and from this conference, I think there's potential to do so. And I think if we have our eye on that target, there's a lot that we could do. Now, there are other philosophical debates. There are people who are saying no to extraction, and we are actually telling Barrick that Barrick must go. Now, there are places where Barrick can't go. I mean, they are so entrenched that they're not going anywhere soon. Whatever we do, I mean, probably if we bomb them. Now, so then we must get to a situation where we are saying, in places where these companies are so entrenched, what is it that we can do, with communities? So that there's a win-win. I mean, it might not be a win in the sense that we would wish it to be, but there's a win-win. I think we need to consider the possibility of working with artisanal, small-scale miners, people who are on the peripheries, are trying to do things in extraction, not necessarily the way the big company does it, but we can work with those fronts. And those fronts would be a very useful tool of generating the agency that we need in terms of when I think about extraction in that sense. And I think from this conference there might be groups and individuals and people who can do a lot of good work. And by this I mean vocational training. I mean, if we have groups that are doing vocational training in certain places, you may generate the kind of skills that the barbaric may utilize, because people need to also have a life and they need to put food on the table and so on and so forth. And those are some of the arguments that the companies and the government use against activists, because they say, you're not providing these guys with livelihood. You don't want the company. The company wants to give them employment. So in a sense, you have all those arguments contesting at the same time, and I think there are things we can help people do if we think about them carefully. I told you it's not very organized. It's up and down, just thinking loudly. One of the things I think that this conference has placed up there is that there is a lot of tension between policy actors. The state, the experts, the social movements are all, undergoing some tension of some kind, because everybody has their idea of what they think this extraction thing should be. But if lawyers do not acknowledge, that indigenous communities have something to contribute, this tension is going to be there for a long time to come. So what I do think we can do, and this comes from the Toxic Tour, in my view, the Toxic Tour for me was a very useful venture. But I think we need to grow it. And in growing the Toxic Tour, this is my view, we must link that Toxic Tour with what's happening in the First Nations. We must say that if the Toxic Tour is happening, something similar must be happening at the ground level where the First Nations live. But we also need to see what the First Nations are doing happening here in Vancouver. I don't know which place you can go and barricade and occupy, but it's going to be you have to start thinking that way. Because these people don't feel the pressure until you hit them where it matters most. And perhaps Gandhi's, for those who have read Gandhi, when he was fighting the British Empire, I think the British only realized they have to go when Indians started to, to defecate on every pavement in the city. So I don't know what can be done. Sorry, on a more long-term, consistent basis. I'm not suggesting that you do that, but I'm saying on a more long-term and very consistent basis, something needs to be happening in the city, just as what the First Nations are doing continues to happen. Then there are three things in this struggle around extractives, finally, as I finish. One is politics. And when we talk about politics here, we are talking about rules of the game. You guys are at a better position to influence the rules of the game and the politics than we on the receiving end are. Because these decisions are crafted here, these rules are made here, and then they're parachuted, to the places where extraction is. I do not know what the possibilities are for influencing the rules of the game so that those rules at least are rules that do not, completely obliterate us. And I think this conference can build the political urgency that is needed. Even if we are going to launch this as a huge international movement around extraction, that is concerned with the rules of the game. As those of us who do what we do in the trenches continue to do what we do in the trenches. The second thing for me is the recognition of these groups, the First Nations, indigenous communities. How can those groups get recognition? And so this is where the linkage between you and them, sometimes getting them to come into the policy discussions in their regalia and in a manner that they know best would be very useful. So we begin to see a linkage between the groups that work in the city and the groups that work in the villages in order for us to influence the political system. In terms of innovations, I don't know how much the digital society will help. Nowadays, activists have begun thinking that you can change society by tweeting or, sending an email. I think to change society, there are things you just have to do physically. So we just have to reach out. I think we just have to be mad. This thing of thinking that you can tweet change, I don't think so. Harbour doesn't read his tweets. Somebody reads them for him. And really...
What was that, Patrick? I'm just going to tweet it.
Yeah, so it's something I think we're going to deal with because the Prof. Chaudhry, when he was speaking, said, he said something like, me, I'm old school. Activism as we knew it, I think, won't change much. The tweets will help where they can, but I don't think they can, change people who have hearts that are made of steel. If you want to change hearts that are made of steel, you have to do something dramatic. And so, a reflection on what are the dramatic things that we can do is going to be an important thing for the conference. In Kenya, we recently, went to the House of Parliament with pigs. We were not happy with the way parliamentarians in the country are greedy. So we wanted to depict them as extremely greedy animals. And so we had all these pigs that we took from a farm and painted names of politicians on each of them. And, then went and released them into, the House of Parliament and poured blood there so that the pigs could be busy, licking the blood and so on. And that was a spectacle that annoyed them, and they're so angry. In fact, there is a legislation that they have proposed to control the NGO sector because of that action. But you'd have to think of dramatic things that were done traditionally. I mean, and the example of Gandhi is one, and there may be other examples, that are useful. Finally, there was the opening speech by Chris, and I didn't know what the controversy with Chris was. I didn't know that a man could be so annoyed, and I don't know what annoyed him. Since I didn't have the context, but I think I thought I should say my take. I think he said certain things that were important, despite the emotional upheaval that characterized the session. And I think for the women's movement, he left you with a question which I would like you to ponder over or reflect over, although he didn't put it the way I'm putting it. I think, is the women's movement only about women?
No.
Yeah, and if it's not only about women, how can women lead this war on extractives? How can the women's movement take a more prominent position in leading this struggle around extractives? Because I think that is one of the ways that we can win this struggle.
Yes, we agree.
if the women's movement is going to appreciate, that the people who are impacted most, by all these things we are talking about when we say extraction on the ground, at ground zero, invariably will be women and children. Then I think in your strategies all over the world, I think you need to be concerned with this issue, and you need to prioritize this issue. And it's very difficult for men who happen to be occupying most of the policy decision stables to dismiss women if women decide to confront them. Culturally, in my culture, if a woman was so disappointed with an issue and she decided to strip and remove her clothes, you would be so cursed, that you would not even for a moment, argue. You would just do the right thing. I'm not asking you to remove the clothes, but I'm saying there's a sense in which you can communicate this better than we do. And I think that challenge is at your doorstep. The discussion by Chris almost pointed out to me that he was saying something. I don't appreciate the emotional nature and some of the other controversies because we almost missed the big picture and focused a lot on the side issue. But I think we can recover from that and we can do the right thing. So let me make those few statements as my own reflections about what I saw for the past 3 days.
Bueno, procuraré ser breve y estar más en esta lógica de ver si ya podemos, bueno, no ver si podemos, sino más bien plantear propuestas y a partir de ahí ver si podemos generar una dinámica de organización.
So I'm going to try to be brief and sort of take the approach of making a couple of proposals to see if we might be able to move forward on those.
Tengo una pregunta para ustedes. Si pueden levantar la mano, ¿quién de ustedes ha estado ya en una mina de cielo abierto?
How many of you here have seen an open pit mine or been at one?
Bueno, entonces la propuesta concreta es que el próximo foro, donde podamos compartir ONGs, académicos, grupos de base, periodistas, radios comunitarias, la hagamos ahí en una mina, ¿no? Donde haya un pueblo indígena que nos platique en términos integrales todos los problemas que pasan, que aquí, les aseguro, no los vimos ni siquiera en un 10%.
So I would propose that in the next forum that's held, where there's NGOs and academics and community members and media, that we do it in a place where there's an open pit mine and a community that can tell us about all the impacts that they're living with, because I'm pretty sure that we haven't even heard 10% of the stories about the kind of impacts they're living with.
Un foro ahí tiene una intención concreta. Los que no somos de ahí, ¿le podemos servir a esa comunidad a resolver el problema que tienen?
This sort of forum would have several intentions or objectives. Those of us that aren't from there could contribute to discussing the issues that need to be resolved.
Es decir, ¿no? Les vamos a hacer sus mapas de sus territorios, o queremos que ellos hagan los mapas de sus territorios y nos los enseñen a nosotros.
So the question, but there's a question here in terms of the process of resolving those issues. Are we going there to suggesting that we're going to create the maps for the community, or are we asking them to share with us the maps that they've made of their community?
No estoy de acuerdo con la corriente que hay en el mundo, donde se plantea que en este sistema tan patriarcal, tan hegemónico, tan colonialista, tan imperialista, tengamos que hacer procesos de negociación.
I'm not in agreement with the current of thought that in this world and in this system so patriarchal, so colonial, so capitalist, so imperialist, that we enter in processes of negotiation.
Y ahí retomo una parte muy importante de la última ponencia, que espero que para el próximo evento empecemos por esa ponencia, ¿no? La organización, pero en el sentido muy concreto de cosas que nos deben de poner a pensar. ¿Cuáles son nuestras coincidencias?
And I think another important point for me in the next forum, it would be important to start with the presentation that we actually just last heard about organizing ourselves, and that we start there. And what are our points in common? That would be our starting point, our first question.
Y lo planteo desde la práctica que durante 10 años hemos tenido todos los integrantes del movimiento mesoamericano en contra del modelo extractivo, ¿no? Cuando no teníamos coincidencias, algunos abonábamos por las negociaciones, otros por leyes mineras para que tuviéramos una minería sustentable y verde, otros que reivindicaran, ¿no?, los derechos de los pueblos.
And this is sort of a reflection on the last 10 years of organizing that I've been part of against the extractive model, where we've gone through different points where some people were thinking about negotiations, others were sort of thinking about new mining laws, and others were resisting extractivism.
Y quienes nos enseñaron a mostrarnos que estábamos en un error cuando teníamos una concepción tan diversa, fueron justo las comunidades. Los procesos a los que estaban viviendo, las situaciones concretas a las que se estaban enfrentando, partían de un criterio único, un estado hegemónico contra un subalterno.
And we learned that we were making an error in sort of trying to represent all of these different points of view, and when we saw that from the point of view of the communities, that really demonstrated how they were being subjected to a very hegemonic system and the impacts of that.
Y si no tenemos coincidencia en el que el modelo extractivo, no Canadá, el modelo extractivo es una condición que busca el despojo y la eliminación de la vida, entonces ¿cómo es posible que tengamos una visión de negociar?
And if we're not kind of on the same page about the extractive model as a model that really seeks to dispossess people and to extinguish life, how can we consider the possibility of negotiation?
¿Cómo le digo a la compañera Petra en Carrizalillo que tiene un aborto, tiene un bebé, un niño de 5 años que nació sin la mitad del cerebro, y su otro niño de parto prematuro tiene lesiones en la piel por acumulación de metales pesados, pero ¿no?, que podemos buscar un proceso de resarcir daños desde la negociación?
How do I say to Doña Petra in the community of Carrizalillo in Guerrero, who has a baby who was born with part of her brain with one lung, premature birth, how do we start to talk about addressing those health issues through negotiations?
Tenemos que tener otra coincidencia de tipo político. Si estamos ciertos que el modelo extractivo es una actividad de despojo y depredadora, ¿no?, también tenemos que estar ciertos que los procesos de resistencia, los procesos por la defensa del territorio, no son solo también condicionantes de los pueblos que están inmersos en este proceso. Creo que muchas ponencias, muchos comentarios han sido en este sentido. ¿Cómo hacemos un proceso de crecimiento donde no solo el pueblo que tenga la Gold Corp ahí metida, esté en una acción de defensa.
I think another sort of point of departure that we need to share if we're talking about the extractive model as a model of dispossession and as a predatory model, then we need to see how the processes of resistance are not just local processes that depend on the communities who are being violated by these companies, these activities.
Y entonces tenemos que darle velocidad a nuestras ideas y a nuestros planteamientos. En 5 años en el que se establece una empresa minera, prácticamente ya no deja nada. No podemos perder mucho tiempo en procesos de formación, de concientización, ¿no? Porque es muy agresivo el modelo que tenemos. Vienen por el gas, vienen por el petróleo, está el tema de los transgénicos, está el tema de la bioprospección para la elaboración de farmacéuticos, está el tema del agua, está el tema de minería, está el tema de hidrocarburos. Esos son todos los bienes que están en el territorio y que por supuesto el modelo extractivo busca con ansiedad.
And we really need to speed up the process of thinking through this and making proposals. In the course of 5 years of a company opening a mine in a community, it's already done significant damage. We don't have the luxury of time in the face of this extractive model that we're addressing. We've got corporations that are coming with great fervor to take away the gas, the oil, to implement transgenic agriculture, with big pharma, water, hydrocarbons, all of the common goods that you find in a territory.
Y en ese contexto necesitamos hacer un nuevo vínculo, una nueva relación entre el campo y la ciudad, entre los pueblos y las ciudades, entre la academia o las universidades para con la sociedad. Nos son útiles las universidades como están en este momento a los ciudadanos y a los pueblos, y ahí hay muchas cosas que tendríamos que estar reflexionando, pero no las podemos estar teorizando demasiado tiempo. Tenemos que estar actuando desde los procesos locales. Y la propuesta es esa: ¿cómo hacemos que al menos la parte que ahorita a mí me toca representar desde el movimiento mesoamericano, con las ponencias que estuve escuchando, cómo empezamos a tener ya una relación por Twitter, diría el compañero, pero para empezar a hacer acciones concretas y constantes y sonantes? Si aquí en este espacio de la universidad hay un área de exposición, nosotros como M4 nos comprometemos a traer una exposición de los daños de la minería que se está mostrando en los museos de México, de la Ciudad de México, para empezar también a informar desde otras perspectivas, con otras posiciones, lo que se está viviendo en muchas de las comunidades de Centroamérica.
In this context, we do need to establish a new relationship between the countryside and the cities, between academia and society, and where there's a lot of things to reflect on right now, but not so much time to theorize at all, and that we need to do that theorizing from the starting point of the local processes that are underway, and there are, I think, some important things that we need to do. I'm here representing the Mesoamerican movement against the mining extractive model, and so how do we start now to build this new relationship that would be much more impactful, that would resonate widely? One very concrete suggestion: there is an exposition currently on the damages of mining that's being an itinerant exposition that is circulating between different states of Mexico and being shown in the Institutes of Anthropology and History, that could be brought here and shown from the perspective of Mexico and Central America about the impacts of mining and what it means for communities.
Nos comprometemos a acompañar a una comunidad, ¿no?, a una nación indígena que esté dispuesta en lo que queda del año a hacer todo lo posible para declarar su nación territorio libre de minería.
we would commit to accompany an indigenous community here that is interested in engaging in a process to declare their territory free of mining, as being done in many communities there.
Y esto lo podemos hacer desde la lógica de la fuerza organizativa, de la movilización, de la organización de los compañeros que por supuesto ya la tienen, no los vamos a venir a organizar, ¿no? Los vamos a venir a complementar en función de lo que nosotros hemos aprendido y vamos a venir a aprender también cómo están haciendo ellos acá su lucha, pero también vamos a trabajar con el marco jurídico, esas pequeñas grietas que nos deja el derecho positivo, que ya sabemos que no sirve para mucho, pero nos deja grietas que podemos utilizar, pero también por supuesto del derecho consuetudinario, el derecho de los pueblos, el derecho natural que no necesita ser reconocido por el derecho positivo para que lo podamos ejercer.
We would do this in a lot with the thinking of through social mobilization, through organization, not through, with the assumption that there already are forms of organization going on in the communities themselves, but rather in a complementary way to share how we're organizing and also to learn from how they're organizing here, and also learning more about the legal framework here that doesn't serve us for a lot, but where we can find little cracks that can be useful in the process, and not just the dominant law, but also customary law and our own law, and learning to exercise this as opposed to...
Miguel, could I ask you to close up shortly so we have some comments from the audience? Thank you.
Bueno, es que eran ya las propuestas. Bueno, y finalmente también hay muchas posibilidades de hacer una agenda de trabajo por lo menos a 3 años, ¿no? Con cosas muy concretas para que empecemos a realizar este intercambio entre pueblos que no se ha dado, sobre todo con la parte de Canadá. Sí tenemos contacto con ONGs, pero no con las comunidades de base. Y eso nos parece súper importante porque hay un mito y tenemos que desmitificar lo que está sucediendo con el modelo extractivo desde la visión que en otros lados tenemos, que en Canadá todo es lindo y bello, y ya nos demostraron que no es así. Gracias.
So just to wrap up then, there are a lot of different possibilities, but it would be nice to have sort of a 3-year work plan, and that would be founded on the idea of an exchange between affected peoples, affected communities. We, through the movement, have been in touch particularly with NGOs in Canada, not so much with grassroots leaders, and it's important to build this relationship because on that basis we can demystify, bust the myths that everything is fine with mining in Canada, which is often sold when companies are trying to get a foothold in communities. So just leave it there.
I really also want to thank Jen and Mining Watch, Jen, for all the work you've done with translation, but also just the support of this conference as well. We quite literally wouldn't have pulled this off if we didn't have Jen's brain to pick all the time, which we do for months now. So thank you. Okay, well, let's have a few questions and comments. Cesar? Or are you just standing there? Cesar. Thanks. Did someone want to comment?
Hello, my name is Ingmar, and I'm a settler in Heiltsuk territory on the BC Central Coast. And just a couple of things I want to see. Keep hearing this organize. And just a quick story. I used to be in the Forest Action Network at UVic, and we had meeting after meeting about getting a tree sit together on UVic. They wanted to mow down the last tract of forest within the ring road at UVic. And the meetings were, we just don't have an organizing system that works anymore. The meetings were fruitless, and finally it was just a couple of us got together a bunch of materials, figured out which tree we were going to climb, and then we called the meeting and said, okay, we're putting all this shit up in the tree, so you guys going to in or not? And everybody showed up, and we went and put the tree sit up, and we saved half that forest. There's a lot of things going on at this conference, and from the wrap-up from the organizers, it seemed like this was a really sort of a revolutionary meeting for Vancouver, and that, you know, Simon Fraser had permitted it and all that. Well, in 2006, I attended the World Social Forum in Karachi, Pakistan. There was 27,000 people came. 7,000 came from India, delegates, the biggest delegation that had come from India since partition. And it was incredible. There was activists from all over Pakistan. Who knew? Pakistan, we hear all in the news about what a repressive, oppressed peoples they are. There was people from the back villages up the Indus, and they were fighting dams, and they were organizing, and they were the people getting up in front of a huge forum of people, the first time ever behind a mic, and just pounding fury. They got their voice. I mean, today the biggest voice that I heard was this beautiful woman, Angelica. I couldn't understand a word she says. I don't speak Spanish, but she resonated with me, and it was a powerful speech. It was incredible. I just want to wrap up by saying, as an ordinary person that's frustrated with the futile process of organizing, the structures of organizing that we have, there are lots of things that you can do as a single individual, and just going out there and doing it. For example, and I would like everybody to please be aware, on the British Columbia coast here, there are tankers carrying a quarter of the spill volume of the Exxon Valdez, traveling on a twice-monthly basis up and down our protected inside passage. And they travel because they receive special exemptions, 27 exemptions to American tug operators that allow them to get around the specifications in the Canada Shipping Act, and that allow them to go up through north of Seymour Narrows. This is the low-hanging fruit of the tanker fight. I encourage you all to come to my Facebook page, 10,000 Ton Tanker. This is an easy stop. If we can't stop this bullshit, we can't stop tankers, we can't stop pipelines in BC. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Everybody has something really valuable to say, and I'm encouraging you all to be as succinct as possible. Our next conference will be called the Succinct Conference, and it will mostly be listening to questions and there'll be no speakers. Go ahead.
I just want to make a suggestion on some of the things that have been said about carrying us forward. From the 10th of May to the 14th of May, wild salmon convergence starting Prince George coming down to Victoria. We want to build from all over, all kinds of places that are in struggle. I would make a suggestion too that as soon as that, the weekend prior to that, and I will look into this in the communities that I'm involved in the Williams Lake, Cornell, Prince George area, of potentially being open to hosting a gathering of people who want to go see some pits and go see the pit that burst open and is spilling into your watershed as we speak. So I would be very willing to work with whoever on making that available and then being able to carry on with the caravan that will be coming all the way to Victoria to let everybody know.
John, how do we find out about that?
The caravan, it's wild salmon convergence. There's lots going up online shortly. We've got some posters. I got handbills with me. The other thing that I would like to mention is the best experience in my life of something that has worked 37 years ago. BC Hydro came to the Cache Creek area, Hat Creek, to dig up all the dirty coal, burn it, and ship all the electricity to the United States. I was 17 at the time, 16 at the time, I got involved in the campaign. It was a very grassroots community consensus democracy model in my mind because it involved the ranchers, the First Nations in the area, and many hippies, and the whole communities got together and kicked BC Hydro ass. We meet in the meadow where there would have been a 300-foot toxic slag heap every summer and celebrate and fight off any other proposals that are coming our way. And it's a massive, important, mirthful celebration to carry on that spirit. That spawned a huge movement of bioregional re-inhabitation that has many co-ops and communities all through the interior. And so I just think it's so important that we keep this going. And out of our workshop with regards to Mount Poly, there were many people that signed on in order to do that. So I'm very, very thankful to.
Thank you.
Thanks for a terrific conference, Steve and your colleagues. I'm Bob Hackett, also at SFU. I just want to say, though, I think there's one area we haven't, as far as I know, haven't really discussed very much, and that is the role of media, corporate media in particular, and increasingly state media, in creating a climate that justifies extractive mega projects and conversely helps to criminalize resistance. I doubt that Bill C-51 would be possible without the media having helped to create the climate of fear. And conversely, there are media of dissent and resistance that deserve our support. So I just want to say that one way to do that would be to check out the annual Media Democracy Day that we've been having in Vancouver every year since 2001. I know democracy is a somewhat problematic term, and maybe we need to start talking more about media justice. But that's the whole idea of it, is to celebrate those independent media and to bring about a change in public discourse via the media that really rightfully ought to be ours as an extension of our right to communicate. So there's a website, mediademocracyproject.ca. And it's one way to bring together different movements. In fact, that's what that annual event does. It's people from all kinds of different movements coming together and creating a community each year.
Thank you, Bob.
Thanks, Bob. There was a discussion of alternative media today, so that it is somewhere in the background here, Bob. Also, just to intervene with a bit of, hopefully a bit of media justice too. Are there any women of color who would like to speak, since we've heard from a lot of men in a row? Is anyone waiting to take the mic? We've got one in line. Could you please step up? And then, yeah, of course, jump in line to Daisy.
Okay, good afternoon. My name is Hila. I'm from Vancouver Rape Relief and Women's Shelter, and I already told Samir and Stephen privately, I congratulate you for a very, very important and successful conference. Of course, you know I'm critical how you handle hedges, but other than that, we learned a lot. And I wanted to answer Patrick for the challenge about the women's movement. I cannot speak behalf of the movement. Can barely speak English anyway, but I can speak for my group. We're a small local group. We have less than 25 members, but our group decided to send 4 members. We've been here all days because we understand how important it is. And we're doing it while operating 24 hours crisis line in the transition house here in Vancouver. And it's clearly that it's in our interest to be right with you on this fight. And there is all kinds of misunderstanding what feminism is. Our feminism is one. It means fight capitalism, fight imperialism, fight colonialism, and fight environmental degradation and resource extraction while we're fighting for women. Because none of us is free until all of us is free. This is our core principle. But we have to have you fighting for us as well. We cannot lead this movement or any other movement if we're being raped and beaten and killed. So we definitely want to be there. We understand all of our lives are attached to each other, and this fight is crucial for all our lives. And like violence against women, and capitalism, and imperialism, resource extraction, of course, impact the most vulnerable, those who don't have legal status, those who do not have social and economic power, like violence against women. But our fight has to be together, and we want you to be in our fight, stopping rape, wife murder, battering, killing, incest, all forms of male violence against women, because we cannot lead and we cannot act if we're fighting for our lives.
If I can just add really quickly, Daisy, that this Samir's reminded me that we are going to keep to a promise that the Institute made in a statement a week or 2 ago, that we will organize a future project around a lot of these exact issues.
Great.
Go ahead.
I wanted to give a few concrete appreciations. I thought the Toxic Tour was a really great idea, and I think the incorporation of praxis, action, and theory together was a smart move on the organizers' behalf. So I wanted to appreciate you for that. I thought the live streaming was a great idea for others who couldn't make it in the rooms to be able to participate. I think the panelists were phenomenal. I thank you for bringing so many people together from all over the world, and I certainly learned. The technical skills were impeccable. There wasn't anything that went wrong as far as I could see. I do have some criticism. One is that you really do need to keep people on time so we can have pee breaks and food breaks and things like that, and it's respectful of your audience to give us a time for a break. so that we can actually not be disrespectful when people are speaking and get up and go to the bathroom. And we have to do that all day, all 3 days. So if you're going to have moderators, then they have a job to do. It would be great if we were fed a little bit, but I know that's kind of hard to do. I appreciate the food in the morning. Again, it's a lot of thinking work, and thinking work actually takes a lot of energy, and you don't know what people are bringing with them, and so I would appreciate if you think that through for the next one. So in terms of the conference itself, of course some of the women here who work in the anti-violence movement and who primarily work in fighting patriarchy, but we see it as interconnected, and we spent our resources and time to come here. I do think that you, and particularly the two of you, Samir and Stephen, acted unprofessionally when you denounced processions. No, this is criticism. It's criticism.
There's so much critique over this, and it's only been one-sided. We're so tired of it.
So can you please listen to me, because I think I'm being respectful.
Yeah, it's fine.
So I think when, Samir, when you said you dismissed him as a keynote speaker in your second keynote speaker, when you introduced Glenn, that's specifically what you said. You said, this is our first keynote.
In my opinion, and
yeah,
that's fine.
I know, but you guys are the organizers, and in order to not shut down debate, when people don't disagree with you, you don't completely outcast them. So disagreement is healthy. Controversial, you guys should be embracing controversy. And I think what you did is you invited him, you got a little bit nervous because there was controversy, you disinvited him, then you put out a public statement that said that you didn't disinvite him, but I have the email, I've seen it. I'll send it to you if you haven't read it. So, and then when...
Daisy, is this the right forum for this?
Yes,
is what I'm starting to wonder.
yeah.
For this kind of critique level, could you consider the aims of the discussion we're trying to have?
It's a feedback, and I'll be one more minute. I'll be one more minute, because not everybody knows what happened, and I think they have a right to know. And so...
From your perspective, completely.
No, I think those are facts. Those are things that happen. So all I'm saying is that the next time...
confidential information
The next
you should not have received.
An email is not confidential, Samir. Come on.
It was sent in confidence.
It was
I don't
not.
think you need to be
So
discussing
can
it.
you let me finish? So the last point I want to make about that is that your academics, you're supposed to be championing academic freedom. And criticism and people who disagree with you shouldn't be shut down in the way you did. So I hope you really consider his criticism and listen to what he said, because he did actually say a lot of things that women do want you to hear.
Thank you. He was also disrespectful, but we can all be disrespectful, I guess, from our own perspectives. We have time for maybe 2 more short comments, please, then we have to do a closing ceremony. They should be very short, please.
This will sound not just short, but perhaps mundane. This is addressed to the organizers. Thanks so much for this conference. And I do have a request. It's also addressed to those fellow academics here. Several of the speakers urged we academics in particular to listen to people on the front lines, to people in the organization. I think that's exactly right. We should listen. So what should we listen for? I think several things, and one of them was brought up really well by Khalid this afternoon, and that is, I'm harking back to one of the philosophers I like. I teach philosophy, named Charles Sanders Peirce, who said, well, there's not just induction and deduction, there's something else he called abduction, and that is figuring out what questions to ask. And that's really hard when you think about it. We sort of inherit these questions, what the journals will publish and so on. But what questions ought we to be asking? So I started keeping a list of, when I thought of this, of questions that I and my colleagues and my students, and our graduate students and so on, could be addressing. Questions that we could address that could be helpful to the struggle. And these are questions asked by people engaged in the struggles. That's not what I want to mention. 2 of them, for example, are this. Some philosophers, not enough of them, worried about what is globalization anyway, or what is sustainability when these were big debates. It's conceptual analysis. It doesn't solve a lot of problems, but something should be done. Well, what is extraction? The word is used by people who favor extraction to mean it's a good thing, and it's used by people who don't favor it as a bad thing. What does it mean? That's something philosophers should do. Secondly, I do not think that the discipline of ethics, which we all teach and people who study philosophy study it, I don't think that that discipline, as it is configured, is up to handling the question, what obligations do humans have to the land? And so this is a matter really of deeply rethinking the discipline of ethics. This is a job for philosophers. So I'm sure, and talking to colleagues in the halls, people from other disciplines, academics from other disciplines, have heard questions thrown out by the frontline activists that we've learned from in the last 3 days, questions that they could be addressing as well. And what I mean by addressing them is writing about them. Those of us who are tenured can write about anything we bloody well please. They can't fire us because we write about things they don't want to hear. So we should do it. We can ask questions of our students, assign questions in classes. We can encourage our graduate students to write theses and do work that are going to contribute to answering these questions. So my request of humanities is that you sort of cull through your notes and maybe get back to some of the speakers and come up with, and it'll be a fulsome one, a list of questions. You could maybe roughly divide them by discipline, although the interesting questions cut across disciplines, but nonetheless you can sort of kind of put them together. Get a list of questions and distribute them to us. I'll leave my name and email number, although you have it. Get it to me. The rest of us could as well. It wouldn't be that hard to do, and I'd like to know what questions people on the front lines would like me to try to answer.
Thank you. I'm going to have to stop things here because we are out of time. I'm sorry, people are still waiting, and let Audrey take over here in just 1 second. And can I just do quick 2 things on this point, which is we do still have this website, stateofextraction.org. There is a button on there that says join, is the right, I always forget what word it says. I think it says join. It's right at the top. You can edit the information, your information there. We will stay in touch with you. We will bring these kind of questions back to the group and try and proceed and find ways that that website can be used as a clearinghouse or a network for bringing some of these struggles together. There is a Facebook page. Shirley keeps wanting me to remember not a state of extraction event page, but a state of extraction Facebook page, which can be used. So we're going to try and find a way, and there'll be a publication coming eventually out of this conference too. So we are hopeful to carry these discussions forward. I'd like to just end there and thank you all for your patience and your participation. And it was grueling, I know that, and I apologize for that for sure. And give this over to Audrey.
I was making a few notes on the handy-dandy shoe phone. First, I would just like to say, especially to the women of the Rape Relief Shelter, that I appreciate you making the time to be here because, as is understood by everybody here, everybody's voice is important. And the questions that you ask are important, and the conversations that are born of what was actually really traumatizing. It wasn't a speech. It was triggering and re-traumatizing for so many people, and it doesn't discredit the work that was done here, and it doesn't discredit the truth, the necessary truth that needed to come out. So to find a way to work together, and despite the high emotions on every side, is the best way forward. So I would like to thank you guys for being here, and I would like to thank the organizers for the work that they've done, and for everybody else who is here now to keep this moving quickly so we can all carry on and start processing this amazing, overwhelming information. Because of what has led to this conference, what has led to the necessity of a state of extraction conference, I'm not even supposed to exist. According to this system that has been in place for a couple of 100 years now, specifically here in BC, I'm not supposed to exist, but I am here. And I do have a voice, and I have reclaimed my power, and I have reclaimed my ancestral connections, and I have reclaimed my dignity and my respect because it is mine. just like each of us here has our own of these things. There's a word in my language, huaythat. It means to wake oneself up. This is the journey I've been on for 13 years, actively, knowledge, like with full intention, with full knowing. It's not graceful. and it's highly uncomfortable most of the time, but I think like most people who learn and go through change intentionally and actively, you learn to be comfortable being uncomfortable. And then when you're comfortable, you start to worry, like, something's wrong. I don't know what's going on here. And there have been, so a couple of years ago, the whole reason that I'm actually here is because I stood in protection of my ancestors to stop a condo from being built over them 3 years ago at Sisnam. Idle No More led to me actually learning how to use that voice that I rediscovered and tapping into that power. Then we have all kinds of things going on in Vancouver. The Amanex climate justice, the SROs, downtown east side organizations and issues, gentrification, displacement, violence against women, blockades and reoccupations. The one underlying thing under all of these is that they are all what we know is wrong. So what we're here for the last 3 days, it feels like it's been an hour, but it feels like it's been 10 years at the same time. What we're all here to do is, yes, we acknowledge that these are the things that are wrong, but where are we going? What are we doing? The questions that are being asked of everybody, what are we doing about this? And each of us in our own small way, every day, are making the changes because we are not helpless. And this situation is not hopeless, because every day when we go around doing our good work, holding on to our good energy, we don't just continue to wake ourselves up, we actually give other people permission and encourage them to wake themselves up. So then you're waking up at least one other person a day. That's doubling your effort every day. And it isn't based on money, and it isn't based on consumerism. It's based on what we're all here for, which is to really be love and light. So this means that we are unstoppable. And the other thing that I do know is that I'm not waiting for the government, I'm not waiting for the courts, I'm not waiting for the enforcement agencies, I'm not waiting for society to give me permission or guidelines or rules to continue to be who I am, to continue to protect. Many times this weekend, and many times, especially in the last few years, be the change you want to see. Don't just say that, do it. It's a simple thing, but my God, it'll change you, it'll change your life, it'll change everything around you. And this is what I'm doing. I am being the change that I want to see out there. I'm being the change that my mother was unable to be. I'm being the change that my grandparents had no choice in. Now, not only do I have the choice, I have the opportunity, and I'm not wasting it. Just like everyone in this room, I'm not wasting it. So the whole idea of extraction, resources, the whole idea why we're here, underneath it all is what I would remind everybody here, and it's what my granny's #1 message is, to be each other's medicine. Don't just take care of yourself, take care of people around you. And sometimes we're not good at taking care of ourselves, so somebody else can remind us to do that. So remember that, especially after this weekend, especially after the ups and downs. I mean, that was a crazy start, and now we've had another powerful, thought-provoking finishing to this. So on that note, the song that I sing is, I sing it. I love and I respect men. I was raised by a single dad around men. I'm really learning to appreciate and enjoy women the same way that I've enjoyed men. And I thank you all for your patience with me. And I sing this all for the women, and I sing it for the men who are learning alongside of us to support us and to support themselves. It's a strong women's song. If you know it, if you want to come up here and join me, please do.